It's a mess. Whatever way you look at it, it is a complete mess.
No manager walks into a press conference, starts open warfare with the sporting director and walks out alive.
Because it was a real leaf out the Enzo Maresca playbook, wasn't it, what Ruben Amorim did?
Is he guilty of thinking he had too much time?
He has been, very stubborn in using that formation when it was clear that he didn't have the players yet for that formation to work.
You can talk about long-term projects, but you still need to deliver in the short term. And he seems to have forgotten about the short term in order for this long-term vision to come to fruition.
The key position for that whole system is the midfielders. And they haven't got him a midfielder that would fit.
And I think actually he's taken for granted that support from the Manchester United fan. I think some of his decision-making has been quite disrespectful to those match-going Manchester United fans.
They've lost 2 of the last 14. They're 8 points better off than last season. 1 defeat in 7.
They're a point ahead of Brentford, who lost their manager, their captain and their best player. They're a point ahead of Sunderland, who've only just got promoted. They're 2 points ahead of Newcastle, who don't travel outside of the North East. They're a point ahead of Chelsea, who are imploding from within. They're 3 points ahead of Brighton, who've not started yet. Honestly, the league position is false. He shouldn't have been hired in the first place. He wasn't the right fit from day one. But ultimately, Jason Wilcox and Omar Barada put their faith in this manager, and it's not been repaid. So if you're going to get rid of the manager, you have to look closer at the people who hired him in the first place.
It's Premier League All Access with me, Sam Matterface, talkSPORT's chief football correspondent Alex Crook, who was in his hot tub last night, firing stories suggesting that maybe Amorim was under pressure. I was half a bottle of red wine in, chasing contacts, and the West Ham story was doing the rounds as well. Together we fashioned a little bit of a story which ended up becoming true because at around about 10 o'clock on Monday, the 5th of January, Ruben Amorim was sacked as manager of Manchester United, appointed in 2024 in November, led the team to the Europa League final in May. But Manchester United, sitting in 6th in the division, have decided to react to his comments yesterday and fired him. It means that Darren Fletcher is going to take charge of the team against Burnley. Now, Dashboard Dean Ashton is here as well. Now, while he's been pumping up his tyres and hoovering his little boot and changing his little windscreen wipers and de-icing his car this week, me and Crook have been in the depths of stories, trying to pull apart all of the threads. This is an amazing turn of events. Premier League clubs changing managers like you changed the oil on your Ford Mondeo. It's amazing, isn't it, really?
Yes, but certainly not as cleanly as I've been doing. I mean, it's messy. It's very messy how this has all come about. And look, it just shows, doesn't it, that there's a line that you cannot cross in terms of what you say publicly, certainly about your employers. And once again, it's the managers that tend to lose their jobs in these situations. 2 massive football clubs, all of a sudden, just bang, you're just shattering things mid-season. So interested to see how this all plays out.
Chelsea and Manchester United in particular seem to be falling over themselves to see which club has the biggest basket case at this moment in time, because it was a real leaf out the Enzo Maresca playbook, wasn't it, what Ruben Amorim did in the press conference after that 1-1 draw against Leeds that you commentated. Good point for Manchester United on the face of it, but that really isn't the main story this morning.
So listeners and viewers, we're going to let you in on a little secret here. This is the second time, actually, in the space of 5 days that whilst doing a podcast, a manager has been fired. So this is what happened. We started the podcast. We did the introduction. We got into it. We sort of knew he was going to get fired, but we didn't know when it was going to happen. We thought it might happen over the next couple of days. Dean actually thought it would go on for a little bit longer, but Crook and I had a little bit of information that it might happen a little bit sooner than that. We didn't expect it to happen whilst we were recording. So we've actually recorded quite a lot of analysis of what we think is going to happen anyway. So you'll hear that in a minute, which is basically us talking as if he's been fired because we knew it was going to happen. But there also is a point when we get later down into the podcast, and we're probably going to keep this in so that you can see what happened, where both of our phones go off and we're like, hold on a second, we've got to stop because Amorim's just been fired. So we'll probably let you see a little bit of that as well, or hear a little bit of that further down the podcast, and you can sort of, you see how it all works. So this is Premier League All Access. Alex Crook is here somewhere. Dean Ashton is with us as well. We're going to look at the Amorim situation. We're going to look at the Chelsea situation. We're going to talk about West Ham, Nottingham Forest in what is a pivotal match as we get to 10 Premier League games live on talkSPORT this week. And Arsenal, Liverpool will briefly touch on as well. But listen, there's only one story in town, right? And that is the revolving management door at Premier League football clubs. Leeds United won, Manchester United won. Dean Ashton, first of all, good game, bit scrappy, both not at their best. It was a bit of a passionate derby. The atmosphere was great. Šeško missed a great chance, actually two good chances. Dominic Calvert-Lewin hit the post. But if you look at both those two strikers, one of them looks like they could be worth 65 million quid and the other one looks like they signed on a free. However, I've got a feeling that if you were coming from the planet Mars, you might get them the wrong way round. Why?
Because one is confident and one isn't. And sometimes it is as simple as that. You look at Šeško's highlight reel and this guy is super talented and can score all types of goals and has shown that he can do for club and country. He gets to Manchester United and all of a sudden the confidence is drained from him and he looks like, a young kid that's starting out and is making mistakes and looking a bit clumsy, whereas Calvert-Lewin looks like a senior player that's found a bit of confidence and that can really tell. I think the worry is for Manchester United, especially in that forward area, is that it's almost like they've swapped Højlund for Højlund, as in looking at a player that just doesn't look confident to take on that role as a Manchester United striker. Now, if you do watch Manchester United, it certainly is not about the striker. I think he was so isolated against Wolves at Old Trafford. I did that game for talkSPORT. He is isolated a lot, but
and in the game against Leeds, until Xerxes came on, again he was very isolated.
But he still needs to take more responsibility. And if you're signing for Manchester United, you should be a player that's walking in, going, "I'm going to show everyone how good I am. I'm playing for this football club." That's what the top strikers throughout the history of Manchester United have done. And at the moment, he's struggling to handle the weight of the shirt, which is a shame, because I actually thought he would be a terrific fit, and I think he is super talented.
And this is part of Ruben Amorim's problem, right, Crook? Because he wanted Ollie Watkins in the summer. He got Benjamin Šeško because of the hierarchy, deciding that was a better fit. Dominic Calvert-Lewin was available on a free. They decided not to go down that route. And bearing in mind it's not Ruben Amorim who's signing the players, the burden of responsibility then has to fall on the guy who was the youth team coach at Manchester City and had 9 months as sporting director of Southampton, who were relegated, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that this, again, is the problem with modern football. A lot of football clubs, and obviously Chelsea, the biggest example, that they don't want to invest in 30-year-olds for the here and now. They want to invest for the future. They want to sign players that are going to increase in value over the course of their contract. But that only really works if the players come in and fire. And Benjamin Šeško isn't firing. Ding has put up a fairly impassioned defence of him there. But I'm not sure that Šeško is an upgrade on Rasmus Højlund. And what I would say, you can talk about him being isolated and starved of service. He gets much more service in this United team, particularly when Mbeumo and Ahmad are there, than Rasmus Højlund ever did. And just doesn't look like he's got it for me. He doesn't look like he's got the belief in his ability. Doesn't look like he's got the confidence to wear that jersey. And I can understand why Ollie Watkins, proven in the Premier League, proven on the international stage, proven as a big game player, having scored in the European Championship semi-final, why he would have been a more attractive proposition. United, to get back into the top 4, had to make up 11 places on last season. I'm not sure that Benjamin Šeško possesses the weaponry to make them do that. And you're right. I said it on breakfast on Monday morning. You can criticise Ruben Amorim, I have done, and if he goes, I wish him well, because I think he's a thoroughly decent man who's done the job to the best of his ability. I do think he's been proved to be out of his depth. But that doesn't excuse the sporting directors. And one of the factors in Dan Ashworth's departure was that he wasn't necessarily on board with hiring a manager so wedded to this 3-4-2-1 system that has only ever worked in terms of the Premier League title once in the history of the competition. He didn't believe, I think, that Ruben Amorim's way of playing was suited to the Manchester United squad. Yes, the hierarchy in place now will say, well, he was dithering, he didn't really come up with any better options, and that's why he went. But ultimately, Jason Wilcox and Omar Barada put their faith in this manager, and it's not been repaid. So if you're going to get rid of the manager, you have to look closer at the people who hired him in the first place.
Are Ineos any good? I mean, I'm looking at their investment in Mercedes, their investment in Nice, their investment in the Swiss Club Lucerne, their investment in Ben Ainsley's America's Cup team. I mean, there's no stellar successes there. Do they actually know what they're doing?
It's a brilliant question, and it's one that a lot of Manchester United fans are asking. And actually, I was listening to the game day phone-in or the final word with Madjan Pardew yesterday, and Alan Pardew made the point. Nobody speaks about the Glazers anymore. The Glazers still run Manchester United. They still own the football club. So Jim Ratcliffe is a minority owner who's come in and he's been given all the day-to-day football decisions. But does his CV and does his body of work in the sporting world justify that? Probably not.
Well, it's a better CV than the Glazers' CV. I mean, they haven't really got exactly a great sporting CV either. But the fact is that
they never finished
they haven't
15th in the Premier League before Ineos came in.
Well, absolutely true. But I just, it doesn't seem to me that they've made any good decisions so far. You know, the scouting department hasn't been upgraded. You know, Ruben Amorim's coming in for a lot of criticism. I mean, Crook says that he will, wish him the best or whatever, but he's criticised him. Do you think that he's done a good enough job, Dean Ashton, during the period that he's been in case? Well, we're talking like he's going to get fired here or he's going to leave, which we all think is going to happen. Let's be honest about it. No manager walks into a press conference, starts open warfare with the sporting director and walks out alive. It just doesn't happen. If for example, it does fall in his favour, it'll be Wilcox who ends up going. I can't see that happening because he's mates with Barada, and who's the CEO, and Jim Ratcliffe has put his faith in these people. So I'm guessing that that Amorim will be the fall guy here. However, has he done enough in his 13 months that he's been in charge, Dean?
No, I don't think so. That finishing league position last season simply isn't good enough for a club the size of Manchester United and the players that he had available. That was not a horrendous squad of players. That was not a squad of players that should have finished where they did in the league. And he has been, very stubborn in using that formation when it was clear that he didn't have the players yet for that formation to work at the football club. And ultimately, he's probably not in a strong enough position for his job not to be under severe pressure, especially if you come out and say the things he has done. Look, he got them to a European final, and they should have won that. Tottenham weren't great either, so he had the opportunity to get Champions League football and win a trophy as a Manchester United manager, and he wasn't able to take that. So there's got to be some positives to the fact that he could get them to a final, but I think he's yet to still prove. And also, I want to see my manager improve players that are there. I want to see improvements. If he is the head coach, I want to see players, go from there and skyrocket in terms of their ability. If you're a good coach, especially the younger players, I still think we need to see a bit more of that.
Is he guilty of thinking he had too much time? This is a major behemoth of a football club that no one has been able to turn around in the last 10 years. And you've employed all sorts of different managers, right? Okay, so you've had Mourinho, you've had Louis van Gaal, you've had David Moyes, you've had Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, you've had all number of people, Eric Ten Hag, who have come into the football club and tried to turn it around. No one's done it. No one's successfully done it. Crook's moaned about every single one of those. Manchester United fans have been very good, very patient with all of the managers, actually, when they're at Old Trafford. But there's been frustrations with them, and ultimately they haven't lasted very long. Is he guilty of thinking that he had more time than anybody else to turn it around? Because if you assess the transfer windows that he's had, he's brought in 6 frontline players, really. 6, just 6. Over 2 transfer windows. And bearing in mind that you've given the keys to the door to a guy who is going to play a completely different system, and he believes that he's got the room to do that, you've made him take over halfway through the campaign when he didn't want to do that and said, "I'll come in the summer," and you said, "No, you've got to come in now," and then you written off one half of the season. Has he? Has he? Like, I mean, I can't work out whether he's been backed enough, which I don't think he has, or whether he's been just a little bit too cocksure of the fact that he's got 3 years to do it and has the freedom to do whatever he wants. That he's caused himself a few issues by maybe not being urgent in getting results.
Well, football is still about results. You know, you can talk about long-term projects, but you still need to deliver in the short term. And he seems to have forgotten about the short term in order for this long-term vision to come to fruition. The Europa League final in Bilbao being a classic example of that. If he just sacrificed his principles, as Ange Postecoglou did in Spain that night, it would have been a different outcome, because Tottenham were there for the taking and Manchester United will be back in the Champions League. And obviously financially, that would have given them more financial muscle to strengthen the squad in the summer transfer window and again in this transfer window that we're operating in now. And I think actually he's taken for granted that support from the Manchester United fan. I think some of his decision making has been quite disrespectful to those match-going Manchester United fans. And again, the classic example of that would be the Everton game. 10 men at home, and he still sticks rigidly to this back three against an Everton team with strikers who never score in the Premier League. He brings on Mason Mount as a left wing-back. I think you're mugging off the match-going fans who are paying to be entertained. Same against West Ham United. And Grimsby in the League Cup obviously has been the nadir this season. So yes, I think he does feel like he is guaranteed to see out this 3-year contract, as Sir Jim Ratcliffe has said publicly, in fairness to him, regardless of results. Football doesn't work like that, because patience does snap in the end.
You say that. I don't think that he's been given enough to be able to play the way he wants to and to take Manchester United on
So
to
play a
where
different way.
everybody
Play a
thinks that
different
they
way.
should be. Yeah, but if you've been promised that you can play your way and you're going to get the resources to do so, and we understand that as early as November he was told that there will be investment in January, and then over Christmas he was told that isn't going to be the case, then you're going to play towards that goal, aren't you? You know, for all the performances that you've talked about, and there have been bad ones, there was Arsenal at home on the opening day of the season when they were good, Chelsea at home when they won and did very well, Liverpool away when they went to Anfield and took all 3 points. They played brilliantly in the game against Bournemouth from an attacking sense without half of the players that were available. They played against Newcastle at home for a very long time with 10 men and struggled struggled with a really poor squad because they haven't got enough players at this moment in time. Yesterday, they had 8 senior players in the squad. 8 senior players in the squad. Not 8 senior players out, 8 senior players in the actual squad. You know,
Wow.
and they managed to go to Leeds United and come up with a point and actually play okay. It wasn't a brilliant game, but they did okay. They've lost
They're a
2
point ahead
of
of
the last
Brentford.
14.
They're a point ahead of
They've lost 2
Brentford.
of the last 14. They're 8 points
How
better
many
off
have they
than
won
last season.
in that time?
1 defeat
Come
in
on,
7.
How many games that you have? 7 wins from 14. Who have they beaten?
Right.
Who have they beaten? They're a
Right.
point ahead of Brentford, who lost their manager,
They're 6th in
their
the Premier
captain,
League.
and their best player. They're a point ahead of Sunderland, who've only just got promoted. They're 2 points ahead of Newcastle, who don't travel outside of the northeast. They're a point ahead of Chelsea, who are imploding from within.
They're above
They're
Chelsea.
3 points ahead of Brighton, who've not started yet. Honestly,
How
the
far are
league
they from
position is
Liverpool?
false. The league position, are they above Liverpool? No.
I said, how far are they from Liverpool? I said, how
They're
far
3
are they
points
from Liverpool?
behind
They're not,
Liverpool,
are they?
who again
Exactly.
have been absolutely shocking for most of the first half of the season.
So, because everybody else has been shocking and the whole division is competitive and much more competitive than it was before, you're judging them by old season standards. The fact is they're 6th in the Premier League. They've got the 4th best attack. They've got the 3rd best XG. They've got the 6th best XG against, the 5th most expected points. It's a team that is heading in the right direction. Whatever way you dress it up, the fact is they are coming forward, aren't they, Dean?
I would agree in terms of I don't think he's yet been given the key position for that whole system is the midfielders. And they haven't got him a midfielder that would fit, I think, what he needs.
He's ostracised one of them.
I know, but if you talk about Carlos Belieber that was rumoured in the summer, that type of midfield player that's got the ability to cover the ground needed and be defensively minded to allow the team to fit around each other, and especially Bruno Fernandes, as he's decided to play him as one of those two midfielders, and they haven't given him that player yet, and that for me is just not good enough when it's clear that he's going to play that way. He said he's going to play that way. Well, give him the midfielder or midfielders that he's going to require for that system to work.
So, Crook, let me ask you this question. You want Manchester United to get back to a point where they're competing for Champions Leagues and Premier League, right? Okay, I'm sure that's exactly what you want Manchester United to do. And I'm sure Ineos, in their weird way of operating, believe that that should be the case as well. But would you concur that you are never, ever going to get there unless you have a long-term strategy and stability and investment in a particular way of playing? Otherwise, you are going to find yourself doing what you've done for the last 10 years, which is changing manager, changing strategies, being left with different players from different managers or different sporting directors' ideas. And then in the end, it's just going to keep going round and round and round and round in the same circle. And you're going to end up where you are right now.
But it has to be the right strategy and the right style of play. You can't tell me that this formation is going to work. It's only ever worked once in the Premier League era in terms of delivering a title. Crystal Palace do it very well under Oliver Glasner. But it doesn't work in the Premier League. It doesn't fit Manchester United's DNA. I'm not interested in silverware, okay? We're a million miles away from that at the moment. But I am interested in entertainment. And Manchester United fans, at Old Trafford in particular, have been starved of entertainment. Everton at home, 10 men. Wolves, the worst team in the Premier League era, probably. West Ham, who are on about firing their second manager of the season. You've got to be turning up and you've got to be outperforming those teams. You've got to be taking the game for those teams. That Newcastle game was gritty, right? And those are quite satisfying wins. But it wasn't nice to watch.
The first half wasn't. The
first
half
doesn't play with
the
wingers.
first half was really
this
good.
This football club is built on wingers.
Yeah, but that sounds like you're harking back to the past and not looking back to the future. The fact is,
you can't have a future at a club like Manchester United without acknowledging the past.
Well, you can acknowledge the past, but you don't have to be wedded to it, because that's the same as being wedded to a system, isn't it? That's like turning around and saying, well, we did this before and it got us success in the 90s.
I want Manchester United to play with wide players.
That won't work. That won't happen, will it?
Well,
okay, you can play with wide players, but you don't necessarily have to go back to the 90s in order to do that. You can play in a certain, there's lots of clubs that play with wingers, but they don't play 4-4-2, a big man and a short striker. That doesn't happen. So you have to develop and you have to go forward. And Manchester United were trying to go forward. Okay, fine. Don't employ him then. But that's not Ruben Amorim's fault. Ruben Amorim has always played a back three. 315 games before the game against Newcastle United, he played with a back three. Mm-hmm. If you expect him to come in and play a back four, you are an idiot.
I agree. He shouldn't have been hired in the first place. He wasn't the right fit from day one.
So what do they do next, Dean?
Well, I mean, look, he's Sir Jim Ratcliffe, publicly in that interview talked about the time scale required for this manager to get things right. So I would fully expect them to continue with that. I mean, obviously the comments are certainly not helpful, and that's something that they are going to have to deal with. But you would expect them to continue with him. I would think so.
Do you think they'll continue with him, Crook?
No, I don't, to be honest. I think when we were preparing our stories on Sunday night and there wasn't much pushback from within the corridors of power at Old Trafford, I think that tells you all you need to know. I think this is going to come to quite an abrupt end.
You think there's every chance that there could be a development before the midweek game, don't you?
I do. Yeah, I do. I can see a Darren Fletcher or even a Michael Carrick in interim charge while they work out what they're going to do moving forward. And listen, the other strand to this is that Enzo Maresca all of a sudden is available. Obviously, here's somebody that Omar Barada and Jason Wilcox know from the Manchester City model. Why has Ruben Amorim chosen now to go to war with the hierarchy? Is it because he got wind of that? Maybe some conversations have already taken place.
So we were having this discussion last night. Him in the hot tub, me sitting in the big chair with the red wine, and we're plotting this little course, and we were suggesting, having spoken to a few people in and around it, why would Enzo Maresca engineer a no compensation departure from Chelsea Let's have a think. Could he possibly have another job lined up somewhere else? I don't know. Would that be the maddest thing you've ever heard, Dean Ashton?
No, I think you're probably both on the right path. I mean, it's quite weird that it probably would fit as well. I think there are probably lots of Manchester United fans that I think would be probably excited with it. I mean, could there be a swap deal, Crook?
What, Ruben Amorim to Chelsea? I think Liam Rossini might have something to say about that, to be honest.
Yeah, we'll only be there for 6 months, won't he? And then they'll change it again, so don't worry about that. Crikey. It is all a bit of a mess, really. I got to be honest with you. And I feel a bit sorry for Ruben Amorim because
Yeah,
I
so
think
do I.
if you're bought in to do a certain thing and then you're told midway through, oh, hold on a second, we've changed our mind. I mean, how can you bring in a sporting director from Newcastle at great cost and then go after 6 months? Oh, sorry, I think we got it wrong. Bring in Ruben Amorim, and then after a year, go. Actually, you know what? I think we got it wrong. I mean, how long are you going to do that for? Are you going to keep doing that infinitum? I mean, you're never going to stumble over a golden bullet where someone's just going to walk in and go, "Hey, look at all these rubbish players. I'll make them into a fantastic Harlem Globetrotter football team. Here's a little sprinkling of magic. I think I can do that." That ain't going to happen. The only way you have long-term success is by having a long-term strategy, a long-term recruitment plan, a long-term strategy of investment in the playing staff and the scouting network. Manchester United have got none of that, have done none of that. And if you don't do that, you won't get the right results. The best clubs in the world have an amazing sporting structure behind the first team. Manchester United haven't had that for years. So you have to implement that. Then you have to have a strategy. Then you have to have a long-term vision. I'm not sure that is all cohesively apparent at Old Trafford. Am I wrong?
No, you're right. And it's a mess. But whatever way you look at it, it is a complete mess. But it has been for some time, and I'm not sure that it's got any better under Ineos. Yes, you know, they've signed some decent players. I mean, Mateus Cunha, I thought was excellent against Leeds, so brave in possession, so brave on the ball, but they're still a long way from where they were not that long ago.
Okay, should we go to another basket case club? Yeah, why not? Let's have a bit more fun. Here we go. Let's switch from Manchester down to the capital. Chelsea managed to draw at Manchester City on Sunday, thanks to a tactical switch by a man who started 2025 as Southampton's under-18 coach. What I liked about this, Dean, was that Callum McFarland set them up to sort of contain Manchester City in the first half of the game, conceded a goal late on at the end of the first half, then reacted at halftime, changed the formation, switched to a 3, put Enzo Fernandez forward, Andre Santos into the midfield, and went for it. Put the lap on in the end as well, and went, you know what? I've got one shot at this, one shot at being the Chelsea gaffer, and I'm going to go for it. And in the end, he got a point away at one of the best managers in the world. So I've got to be full of praise for him.
I totally agree. Because you know, when you're in that position, it would be easy, I think, to try and not settle for a decent showing. But hopefully, you know, with the research that he's done, Manchester City can be got at these days, and they do at times sit back a lot more than they ever have done. Manchester City aren't really a team now that really press as a team from the front. It's very rare, actually, that I see them do that kind of real full press where they swamp the opposition. They don't do it as much. I don't think they have the athleticism within the forward line to do it. I think Chelsea, obviously, and the manager recognised that yesterday and had a right go at them. And why not? You know, if you're in that position, he's trying to showcase his thought process and be brave doing it. Obviously, the goal was as scrappy as you like, but it's about the intent.
But he may well have put himself on the long list for Chelsea manager future, because we are now in a process of trying to limbo under the age restriction. Ethan Nwaneri may well end up being the next Chelsea manager because they're going so young. We're trying to get the youngest people possible to stand in the dugout for Chelsea. Liam Rossigna, sacked by Hull City, finished 7th in France. Very smart, very socially conscious, very intelligent, very articulate, very polite, born round the corner from Stamford Bridge. But is he a good head coach, or is he a good coach? Because I don't know if he is allowed to be called the head coach. Is he sort of the good sort of head coach? Is he going to be given the autonomy to be able to pick the team and do a job? And will he be in by Wednesday, Crook?
I think he will be in by Wednesday. Obviously, he flew over to England on Sunday night watching Chelsea, Manchester City on his iPad at the airport over in France. Will he be given the autonomy to pick the team? No. He's going to have to work under the same perimeters that Mauricio Pochettino was fed up with by the time he left, and the spelt the end for Enzo Maresca. Chelsea have a certain model. They've made it pretty clear to us in the wake of Maresca's departure, the hierarchy there, that they're not for changing. So he is going to have to rotate the squad, use all those young players in order to help increase their value. He's going to have to pay attention to the medical team, maybe a bit more than Maresca did, and he's going to be told which players are coming in and which players are going out. I think this is a massive jump for Liam Rossigna. He's in an almost impossible situation because he couldn't turn it down because he'd end up being
He's not allowed to.
Exactly. So he couldn't turn it down and stay in Strasbourg. He couldn't turn it down because it's Chelsea. And if you're a young manager, this chance might not come around again. But I think he'll know in his heart of hearts that if he's there this time next year, he'll have done pretty well. Because despite, again, what Clearlake and Bluecoat told us when they came in, they didn't want to have this revolving door of managers like Ruben Abramovich did. That's exactly what they have done. They've changed managers with the same regularity.
If not more. It's been absolutely crackers, to be honest with you. Tuchel, Potter, Lampard, Pochettino. Then you've got Enzo Maresca. Now you've got Liam Rossigna. Good luck to him. I hope he does really well because he's a very, very nice man. And he has done a really good job. He's a bright coach. And anyone who's sort of studied his work in France and listened to his team talks, because there's a lot of that doing the rounds at the moment on social media. You might have seen them. Listen to the way he talks about football. He's very, very clear. He's got a lot of clarity of his instruction, and I hope that it comes across. But it's a very difficult environment for him to work in, as all of these clubs are. I mean, the problem is there's a lot of ego involved. I think the commonality between Manchester United and Chelsea is there's a lot of ego involved, isn't there, Dean? You know, the guys at the top, Jim Radcliffe, think they know best. Egg Barley thinks he knows best. Maybe they do. They're brilliant businessmen. They've come up with brilliant plans to make lots and lots and lots of money. But in football, you do need a level of expertise that is beyond just, being a massive super fan of a football club.
Yeah, I totally agree. And again, when you look at the clubs and the teams that have been successful, it has been built over a period of stability and alignment in recruitment to a certain style. I think Arsenal are a perfect example of that currently, in the way that they've managed the football club and brought in players that fit exactly how Arteta and I guess the club feel like that they should play. I just think, Potter was an example of a manager that's making the big step up into an environment, and it is very different. The environment and the expectation, every single game, the scrutiny on every single performance, single decision or substitution you make is huge. But Liam Rossigna might be the type of character that isn't that big ego to possibly clash with the ownership. He is the type of character, I think, to just come in, get his head down and do his work.
Yeah, I think the other thing is he's quite confident in his own ability and he's pretty sure of himself. So I don't think that he will, unlike Potter, wilt under the pressure. I think he knows full well what's coming his way. We've sort of reached out to him privately over the course of the last 6 months when we knew that this was happening. He's pretty self-assured. He's takes everything in his stride. He's not going to push it. He's just going to do things the way he thinks they should be done. But he's also I don't think, going to wilt under the spotlight of being the Chelsea manager the way Potter did. Potter found it really difficult, like really difficult. Actually, Enzo Maresca, who came from Leicester, didn't. He didn't wilt under the spotlight. He made a couple of weird decisions and some serious missteps in press conferences, but ultimately, he did a reasonable job, I think we could probably say. But they take on Fulham on Wednesday night, and I suppose we should discuss Fulham a little bit, because I suppose one of the big things here is that Premier League jobs are starting to come up now at top clubs. Chelsea's one of them. Manchester United may well be another. Yet Marco Silva is not being linked with them. Crook.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, because I don't think he could have done a lot more than he has at Fulham. I thought they were excellent against Liverpool again at the weekend and fully deserving of their point. Bearing in mind they're depleted by injuries and AFCON absentees. They're only themselves 3 points off the top five. But you're right, his name isn't really being taxed to those type of jobs. He was linked with Manchester United before Ruben Amorim came in, so maybe he might still be part of their decision making. But again, he's not going to operate at Chelsea under those restrictions. Marco Silva is very much his own man, and he is someone who certainly isn't shy about challenging the hierarchy. So I wouldn't see that as a fit at Chelsea at all.
Well, he's sort of one of those that doesn't quite have Unai Emery, Mikel Arteta, or Pep's power, but he's sort of on that next run, isn't he? He's that sort of Eddie Howe-esque type figure who has an influence, a little bit more influence on things that happen behind the scenes. And he is a very good manager. It is really weird, isn't it? That maybe the three most successful clubs in the country at the moment, Arsenal, top, City, second, Aston Villa, third, have put quite a lot of faith in the manager. It's weird, isn't it? Oh, God, dear. How does that happen? Fulham are 11th, unbeaten in 5 in the Premier League. Chelsea have won 3 of the last 4 at Craven Cottage. That is one of 10 live games on talkSPORT and talkSPORT 2, Talk Radio, and the talkSPORT app over the course of the next 3 days. We've got everything this midweek, so make sure you join us for that. Download the talkSPORT app. Okay, we have spoken a lot, and we've still got a lot to talk about. So we better get in to the bottom of the table and Dino's desperation derby. Dino, the desperation derby. Massive relegation 6 points at West Ham, 18th in the Premier League, 14 points. Nottingham Forest, 17th in the Premier League, 18 points. Both sides absolutely dire, making this potentially a season-defining game for both. Which one comes out with credit? Who wins? Dean Ashton.
I mean, the way both have played recently, it'll scream a draw probably. But West Ham need to win this game. I think, for Nottingham Forest to get that gap now to West Ham, who are obviously trying to be as active as possible in the transfer market, that's going to be a big jump. It's going to be a massive jump if they lose this game to get themselves out of trouble when you haven't looked like getting yourselves out of trouble and showing such a lack of fight. Is just worrying. I think if you're certainly a West Ham supporter, I think Sean Dyche and Nottingham Forest in certain games have shown some really good performances. So it surprised me then, the sort of the ups and downs of their performances so far. But actually, I think if you look at his Everton side, Sean Dyche, that's a little bit what they could be like.
Yeah. They won 7 of the first 12 games under Sean Dyche, right? Okay, and okay, so they've had a bit of a blip. They've failed to win the last 4. In fact, they've lost the last 4. One of those games was against Manchester City, by the way, which arguably they didn't deserve to lose. It was a really, really tough game for Manchester City, and they played really well in that match. So, I mean, if you were a betting man with the investment that that they are capable of, by the way, because I think they're going to try and buy a striker during this January transfer window. He wants a big striker to play up front. He hasn't got Chris Wood because of the injury. But if they get someone who can put the ball in the back of the net, which I think Evangelos Marinakis will do his best to get one, whether or not that happens or not is a different matter, then I would be backing Nottingham Forest to stay up. If I'm backing Nottingham Forest to stay up, and Leeds United are already 8 points clear of West Ham in third, West Ham are already down That's a real concern to me.
And I think it's a real concern to their supporters that even though they're in such a precarious position, they are spending a lot of money on players who maybe aren't going to cut it in the Premier League and certainly aren't going to be part of the furniture when it comes to Championship. They spend big money on Pablo, a young Portuguese striker who obviously scored a lot of goals over in Portugal this season. But as we've seen, various examples, Gyökeres, the most high profile of late. It's not always easy to translate that to scoring in the Premier League. And then this guy from Lazio, Tati Castellanos, who's coming in for, again, a not insignificant fee. He scored 2 goals for Lazio this season.
And he was out injured for 6 weeks with a hamstring injury.
I don't understand the recruitment. I do not understand the recruitment. I've just had a message, by the way, that Amorim's been sacked.
Oh, right. Okay. Well, that's good podcast information. Let's have a quick look at our phones. Let's take a pause live on the podcast while we just chase that up. We all thought it was going to happen. Well, that's the way that it works in journalism. So I don't think any of us were surprised about that. We kind of knew it was going to happen, which is why we front-loaded the podcast with a lot of Amorim chat and why we suggested that he wouldn't be around for much longer. And I think none of us are surprised about it. And that's the way it goes. It's a bit of a shame, I think, for Manchester United because I just think it's a bit of a shame because, again, they've just ripping up a project and starting again. But West Ham United were the focus that we were talking about, and Forest and West Ham clashing on Tuesday night is a massive game for both. The only team in the league yet to keep a clean sheet at home this season, West Ham. They've conceded 23 goals at home. They're facing a Sean Dyche team that will exploit them at set pieces. And one of the things that I noticed at the weekend, I don't know how much you saw of West Ham, Dean, was the fact that the defence was so slow to engage against a Wolverhampton Wanderers team that are struggling at the bottom of the table. Now, Forest aren't great, but they're much better than Wolves, and they will cause you problems. And if Mavropanos, if he was racing against himself, he'd find a way to come second because he never gets out quick enough to the ball when someone is charging on the edge of the penalty. That defence is absolutely off it, miles off it. How can you operate if you've got a defence that can't keep clean sheets?
Well, you find yourself in the bottom three is what happens, and I think you're spot on in terms of you can't just defend hoping that you're going to keep the opposition out. There has to be some engagement. There has to be some intensity in the way that you defend. I think as a whole team, they don't particularly defend well. And we're just talking about manager changes. I mean, that performance to go to Molineux and that first half performance is almost a sackable performance in terms of 0 shots on. You had 1 shot and 0, and it wasn't on target against Wolves, who have had just a horrific season. And other teams have. I know they've improved recently, but other teams have teed off against Wolves, and you go then you're 3-0 down at half time and have 1 shot. You know, where's the improvement? Where's the players' fight for the manager, and how's he motivating them? I honestly, if they lose to Nottingham Forest, you can't see how they're going to get themselves out of it, even if they buy 2 strikers.
Yeah. West Ham obviously slightly concerned about Lucas Paquetá as well. Has had a bit of an injury during the course of the last few weeks. They look like they've going to have to start one of these 2 new strikers this weekend. Callum Wilson hasn't really done it, even though they do look better when he's in the team because it means that Bowen can play further out wide. For Forest, they're missing Chris Wood and they're going to be missing him for a long time. But West Ham have failed to win any of their last 9 Premier League games, and that would concern me. In the reverse fixture, actually, earlier in the season, West Ham won against Nottingham Forest. Nuno Espirito Santo was in the other dugout. So I wonder whether or not there's going to be a little bit of revenge. It could be quite a nervy affair, and the atmosphere is going to be interesting, isn't it? Because we've both been at the London Stadium when expectation has been low and the noise has been almost silent. We've both been there when there's been sort of toxicity in the air, but it hasn't really felt like that recently. It's almost felt like a resigned apathy. And I just wonder what this is such a crucial match. I think this defines the season. If West Ham lose, I think they're gone. If West Ham win, there might be that small little flicker of hope. And Nuno might even limp on for a little while because we understand that they're considering his position as well, as you already mentioned, Dean. So it is a sort of almost a cup final.
Yes, but it won't have a cup final atmosphere because they've come to expect tepid performances from the team. The team don't play in a way that lifts the crowd, that West Ham crowd they need lifting. They've been low for quite a while, and they, the stadium, the atmosphere, it needs lifting by the players, and that's the players have got to try and take responsibility in that. And I don't mean if the manager sets you up to be slightly defensive, well, that's fine, but there's got to be an intensity. There's got to be an intensity that shows everybody that you really care, that this matters, that you understand the situation you're in, that you're fighting for your Premier League lives. If the supporters see that, they'll get behind them, and there will be a decent atmosphere. But I don't expect it to be a great game. And like I said, I actually do expect it to be a draw. It would not surprise me, a 0-0, a 1-1, tight, horrible game, no atmosphere. It wouldn't surprise me.
Looking forward to doing that with Martin Keown. That's Tuesday night live on talkSPORT. Bit of context around the big game of the week in terms of the title is concerned. Arsenal against Liverpool, 8 o'clock kickoff, Emirates, under the lights on Thursday night. That's also live on talkSPORT. I suppose Arsenal want a little bit of revenge from going up to Anfield and succumbing to a 1-0 defeat in a very tight game back in August. Dominic Szoboszlai with the goal there. Arsenal struggled to break Liverpool down, didn't they, in that match? But it's a little bit different now. And I just feel as if Arsenal have just got something about them, that sort of chest puffed out attitude that they showed down at Bournemouth after conceding a goal. They never looked like losing to me. I thought as soon as even though they gave up a cheap goal, I thought they'll win this. They'll come back and win this. And that's their attitude. That's their feeling. And Liverpool being a little bit blunt, the stalemate against Leeds, struggling to score goals earlier in the week as well against Sunderland. I just wonder whether or not this is a game Fulham, not Sunderland. This is a game that Arsenal will end up winning and winning quite comfortably, Dean.
Well, I think obviously players getting back fit and the strength of that squad that Arsenal have got. Liverpool, Ekitike, obviously, I think with a slight hamstring issue as well, who's been kind of the one player that does look like he can score goals with some regularity for Liverpool. And I think a bit like the Aston Villa game, where maybe I was slightly naive to think that Villa would have a strong chance of winning that. Again, maybe this is similar, where you feel as if Liverpool could get something, but Arsenal might just show and flex their muscles again with a victory. But obviously, playing last, is always difficult for the teams up the top. So we'll see, how Manchester City get on and if they can, and Aston Villa, and if they can put the pressure on Arsenal.
Okay, Dean, we've sort of been overtaken by events, really, haven't we? Because Ruben Amorim has been sacked as the manager of Manchester United. This first game for whoever is in charge on Wednesday night is going to be live on talkSPORT, Burnley against Manchester United. Do you know what's really fascinating here? We don't know what's going to happen next. We don't know who's going to be in charge. But I would think to sack him, they must have a plan in place in order to bring in somebody else. They must have an idea in their mind. I mean, if you listen to the first part of this podcast, you may already have that idea as well. I don't know. We'll see what happens over the next few weeks. It was fascinating, though, that it came to a head so quickly after I spoke to him yesterday. In fact, I spoke to him less than 24 hours ago, and he was in a reasonably good mood. He was quite relaxed. He was chatting. He came over and had a little chat with me before the interview and afterwards as well. I wasn't suspecting that would be the last time I saw him in a Manchester United uniform, but there you go. That is that. Right, all the live football is on talkSPORT this week. 10 live games, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And then, of course, we'll be back later in the week to review all the weekend action and tell you which other clubs have changed their managers. Because as Dean Ashton now departs the dashboard to go and change the oil in his Ford Mondeo, there will be another manager fearing for their life once again. Dino, thank you very much.
Top stuff.
See you later.